Why? Why does my watch decide to talk at that moment? All right, we'll edit that out. All right, here we go. Hey, you guys, welcome back. I am so excited to have with me Samaire Armstrong, who is an actress on God's Not Dead. They have a new installment coming out that is so timely and so relevant right now as we're going into an election season and we're seeing all of this craziness happening within our country. I think this is going to be a great movie for families to see, and I can't wait to dive into it a little bit more. So, Samira, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this project. I think it's really important, and I'm so grateful that there are people who are enthusiastic about the principles of this nature. I mean, it's nice to know that it's an all-encompassing community out there that cares.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. And this franchise that you're a part of now has just done some really. They've put out some really great films, and they've made people think about things. And the way that they've presented it has been so impactful. So I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about In God We Trust, which is the newest installment. What can you tell us, kind of from a high level, just overview for those who may not have seen the ads and stuff yet? What is this movie, kind of the premise? What's it about?
Essentially, the premise is that, and the message is okay. The message is um, it's our responsibility and our duty to go out and do good, and sometimes we're called to action for something that we don't feel that we fit the part,
Hmm.
and yet to our community it's imperative that we stand up and um, fight can be such a divisive word, but fight for our beliefs and
Yeah.
our country in this particular film. In God We Trust is such an interesting moniker because it is it is a token of our nation's our slogan, and yet throughout the years, God has been ripped away from our our engagement with
Yeah.
the political realm, which is fascinating because it's what we fundamentally built this country upon.
Right.
And so, so essentially, the film is a pastor is called to run for Congress, and one of the sentences in the movie is that if we don't do this, we'll lose a majority, and we're one step closer to coming Venezuela,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
we all know what is going on in Venezuela. And of course, that's a bit hyperbolic, but it's certainly a direction that we are likely heading. And it's not for reasons of malice necessarily. I think a lot of the people that we're up against have good intentions, but are so naive to the reality of what happens when socialism comes knocking at your door. And that's
Yeah.
sort of a broad stroke of what the finer pieces of this movie are about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even in the 2 minute trailer, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on, and you do see the pastor who's been in, and I believe all of the God's
Yeah,
Not Dead movies.
yeah.
You see him starting to run for Congress, but how does your character fit into all of this? Because as
Yeah.
I was watching, I believe you're the only you're kind of a main female character in the middle of all of this. So how does she fit? And what did really drew you to this character in this movie?
Yes. Well, I mean, this whole project was an act of God, and how it came into my life was by divine intervention. 1000%.
Hmm.
I don't even know where to start, whether I start with myself or I start with the character, but um, essentially in 2020, I had a massive awakening. And I was very outspoken about what I saw to be inappropriate in our country at the time that
Hmm.
was going on. And I sacrificed sort of the sheltered existence of my acting career by speaking out, speaking to what I
Yeah.
was seeing. And because of that, I lost a lot of friends, as we
Hmm.
many of us did when we drew the line in the sand of what we considered wrong and right. And I moved my son to my hometown. When I was living in Los Angeles, I moved home to Sedona, Arizona, for reasons of it was essentially impossible to raise a child, in my opinion, in Los Angeles anymore
Yeah.
for obvious reasons.
I've heard so
And
much of that. Yeah.
oh, it's so gnarly. It's just, it's really sad, quite sad. And so I moved here. I had spoken out. I had spoken out during the political election. I had spoken out against the riots. I had spoken out against the government trying to strong arm us into things that I didn't feel was
Yeah.
appropriate. And then I ran for mayor. I moved to my hometown and
Wow.
ran for mayor because I felt like, um, I was one who was very vocal in what was going on. But if you're not actually going to do anything and put your, feet to the ground and get out there and participate in what you're complaining about, then you don't really have a right to continue to complain. And
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
to complain. You know,
So I'll earn it.
exactly. And what was going on in my community was really interesting in that people were, kids, people that I grew up with, and families who have been here for decades were really upset by their way of life and what was happening. But I was able to draw the line between the policy that was being
Hmm.
instated in our community and to the quality of life. And I could
Yeah.
do that because I lived in Los Angeles and I saw well-intended policy deteriorate society.
Wow.
And so I spoke, in support of, um, essentially like walking back a lot of regulations that existed, and that was very much like what our previous president did. Was like, we've got too many rules that are making
Right.
it impossible, and they're all rules for the sake of like feeling better but not living better.
Right.
So, and needless to say, it was a really, gosh, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
And it was a very contentious election, especially because it was supposed to be nonpartisan, but my opponent and the people who didn't want me to be in there made it partisan,
Hmm.
and that's a challenge. But I did not win, and after that moment, I said, okay, what I had prayed through the whole process. I prayed for my community's best interest, for my
Yeah.
family's best interest. It wasn't to win, that it was, and in the process, I'd hoped to expose what was going on and wake people up. And I think I'm for sure I did that.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
afterwards, I was like, okay, God, like I was called to do that. I fulfilled my obligation, and now I'm on the other side. What am I supposed to do now? And I really got the message of doing faith-based projects.
Hmm.
And I had this, like, the word franchise came to my heart, and
Hmm.
I was like, oh, well, I mean, the only franchise I know is Fast and the Furious. I was
Oh.
like
Not so much faith based.
and I got a message from David White's production company and said, we have a script and we'd like you to take a look at it.
Hmm.
So I take a look at it, and it's a single mom who moved, which I am, moves her son back to the hometown and raises her child in safety, is asked to come out of retirement and to run a political campaign.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm getting chills just saying it.
Wow.
I was like, the parallels are obviously jarring, and the
Yes.
crazy thing, which is, if it's not odd, it's God, is that they had no idea I had just done that. And so I wasn't sure at first. I was like, are you asking, like, what are you asking me to be part of this, or am I supposed to just read it? What's happening here? And they offered me the role. Of course I said yes. I thought the
Wow.
message was so incredibly poignant, um, I want to use the word brave, but I think there's something a little bit, a stronger word I could use, and I'm not finding it now. But to say the things that are so raw and vulnerable, um, and to be able to be, I mean, my gift that I was given by God was storytelling. That's what I've
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to do. It's what I've been allowed to pursue, and now I have the opportunity to both share, and this is rare, a message that I believe in the form of
Yeah.
storytelling. I mean that I don't know that that happens often, certainly not to this
Right.
to degree. And my
Yeah.
character is such that she's not a person of faith initially, and she's very much like we have to we have to lie, steal, and we have to lie, steal, and cheat
Hmm.
to get the result we need.
Hmm.
She's the juxtaposition to the pastor's character,
Right.
who's the
Right.
man of God, and she's like, you can't go based on God. That doesn't, like, this is the real world. That's
Yeah,
not how it works.
exactly.
And of course, discovers along the way that maybe she has some learning to do in that regard herself.
Hmm.
But the story is so powerful in that it's one of those films you leave and you're like, yes, I am ready to walk with God. I have the spirit inside of me to do what is right. I feel compelled and justified to speak out with love and compassion for what I believe in, for all that is whole. It's motivating, and I want to
Hmm.
watch it. I want to watch stories that are motivating. I want to participate in stories that
Yeah.
are motivating. And the thing about a story like that is that there's an ebb and flow to it. There's times when you're down on your knees crying, asking for guidance, begging for direction, and it sometimes feels like you're not getting it. And
Yeah.
then at the final hour, God always comes through. He's got you,
Yeah.
and it's been an incredible uh, uh, what do they call them, pillar in my life that I
Hmm.
have had the luxury of experiencing over and over again with God. You know,
Yeah.
am I here alone? Am I doing the right thing? And then, in the complete darkness, like not being sure which direction to go forward with, and praying to be of service. And then, in the 12th hour, there's God who, with the light shining to show me
Yeah.
the way. Uh, so I'm excited. I feel so blessed.
And that comes through. And I think hearing you talk about the project, even if we didn't know anything about it, but hearing the way that God brought all of this together, hearing your
Yeah,
excitement about it
yeah.
makes me want to go see it. I mean, I'm like, sign me up, get me my ticket.
Oh,
I want to be
good.
there.
So
Um,
glad.
and I also love, you alluded to this, but we talk about this all the time, and it's such a powerful thing to remember. God uses what He's put in your hand. He takes the gifts and talents that He's given you, the loves. So for you, that love of storytelling, He is now putting that in play because you opened your hands and said, God, I am yours. I will serve you how you want me to. And He magnifies it and multiplies it in ways that we would have never, ever imagined, as only God can do. And so, no matter what your skill set is, you may not be a storyteller. You may not have, the same path that others do, but God will take those skills and those talents and those loves and those passions that He's put in your hands, and He wants to use you that way. And that is an amazing thing to remember, because everybody has those. There's nobody that God can't use or that God doesn't want to use. He has a purpose for you, and He wants to mobilize you and use you to bring others to Him, to point people to Him, and to help impact communities and culture and churches and everyone around you for the sake of His name. And it is an amazing privilege to get to do that.
Amen, Leslie. Absolutely. That is the absolute truth. I had
So,
a manager growing up, and in the acting field, there's dry times, and you start to question everything. And he would say to me, God didn't give you this gift in your heart to not use.
yeah.
And that's what it's there for. It is there to utilize.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to learn to wait. Sometimes
Yeah.
He's doing things that you won't know until you have the benefit of hindsight to even connect those dots. But
Yeah.
you get to learn in those quiet times, in those dry, dark times where you're so impatient and you're so frustrated.
Yeah.
You get to actually learn to trust Him, and you
Mhm.
can draw nearer to Him, and you can get to know Him more, so
That's
that
how.
when that day, exactly, so that when that day comes that He says, now it's time, put this in play, you are so much more prepared and ready at every level to dive right in and walk through that door boldly that He's opening for you. It is His his ways are so much bigger and better and more amazing than we would ever plan. It just, I stand in awe.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. It is awe inspiring just how
Yeah.
he shows up, and I mean, way more elaborate and specific than you could have ever dreamed. It's always tailored perfectly for you, just to tickle
Yeah.
your heart so specially.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, you had noted earlier that you're a mom
Mhm.
and you play a mom in this movie. We talk primarily to
Mhm.
parents, specifically homeschool parents are the ones who are largely listening to this. I wonder, how does your role as mom, both in this movie and really in real life, how do you think that this is going to reflect the way that a lot of parents are trying to navigate culture and parenting and all the things that we're trying to point our kids to Jesus, and we are bombarded with all this yuck all around us. and and you noted this earlier, we want to model a discourse that is kind and edifying and that shows love to one another. People were made in the image of God, whether we agree with them or not, and we want to show God's love to them. So how do you see all of these themes kind of winding through this character of Lottie, the mom that you get to play in this movie?
Um, the character of, I mean, I think ultimately Lottie is making choices for the benefit of her son's future, which I think as parents that's the best parenting that
Yeah.
you can try to embody is, how will this affect my child's growth and outcome. And I mean, and I completely relate to that because I don't know that I would, had I not become a mother, I would 100% not be the person that I am today, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't understand the true meaning of sacrifice, and um, that that I joyfully, go through today. Uh, I mean, even just as an actress, I always wanted to be, since I was 3 years old. I wanted to be an actress. I'm moving to Los Angeles. I'm going to be an actress. And then once I had my son, it was very much like, okay, it's no longer just about me becoming an actress anymore. It's
Mm,
about me providing a childhood for this this creature that will be nurturing and perhaps at times challenging, but uh, the adventure must be beyond what my heart is seeking, and not just my ego, right? Because
right.
I could have just stayed in LA, but I really felt compelled to, okay, where is the best place to raise a young
Yeah.
boy with dirt and the outdoors and creeks and family and community, and I think ultimately that is, Lottie's decision as well. And the challenge is finding the next stepping point to balance the the non-secular world with what your beliefs are. The
Yeah.
how do I maintain a but it all goes back to God. I mean, it all goes back to God, and especially this path, this walk with Jesus, and with God. It's like with God, I've been in touch with for a very long time, but it's been intimate, and it hasn't been
Hmm.
an exploration with other people that I've discussed much. So when I started to consider, oh gosh, I should start to communicate this with my son,
Right.
for the great, like, this is how I know God exists. One more example. This is so embarrassing, especially for homeschooling podcast. But my son has a phone. He is a young, almost teen, not even teen. He somehow got on an algorithm that exposed him to Jesus. And
Really?
yes, yes. And when I started to have this conversation with him, he's like, "Oh no, I've already given my heart to Jesus, Mom." I mean, how did you do that? I was
Wow.
like, well, I learned about it. And he started, using the tools of modern day society to investigate more. His first Bible he bought off TikTok shops. which I mean,
Really?
yes. So there, I think
Wow.
he defies most, what we hear out there, all the ickiness that you're talking about. But what I discovered is that his friends are the same, and somehow, and maybe it's an act of rebellion against what seems to be the modern day consciousness. It's like kids always want to rebel against something. For him, his rebellion is going to Jesus, and
Wow.
his friends are the same. So here we are. He's going to Sunday school, and we're going to church, and without him, I wouldn't be walking that path. And
Huh.
so in all this idea of like the parent and the authority, of course, but I'm also being guided with him from his path as well. So I'm not sure if that answered any specific question, but that's kind of the journey that we've been blessed with together. So
Wow.
it's an interesting unison that's occurring.
Well, and it just shows that God is so involved in
Yes,
individual lives.
yes,
He is leading, he cares
yes,
young ones and old
yes,
ones, and he is able to reach hearts where we wouldn't have even thought that it was possible.
exactly.
And he is so good to do so, and so you
Right,
hear, I think it's so good for so many of us to hear a testimony like that, because it's different maybe than the path that we've walked, and so to
right,
hear how God is working
right.
in other ways is so exciting, and it's so amazing, and it just makes me want to throw up my hands and praise him more, because I am so grateful for his love for individuals, and the way that he reaches into hearts and lives of those um that are searching for him, and that he's calling out to, and it's just an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so I want to talk just a little bit. I think a lot of people, I know I am, so I'm going to say everybody else is too,
Okay.
are just really interested to know, what is, you've worked on shows and other projects that are not Christian. This is a more faith-based, Christian focused film. What is kind of the difference in the working environment and the dynamic? What is life like on the set of a movie like this?
I'm so glad you asked that. I love that question. And before you and I began just now, we prayed together, and that's what every day on set was like
Hmm.
while filming this movie. We'd start the day in prayer, and there was a there, it's different. You feel supported by something greater than yourself
Wow.
when you're serving something greater than yourself. And in Hollywood, it was something that I was always searching for, and I think a lot of people get wrapped up. Just like you, I'm saying a lot of people, personally me. Um,
Exactly. So we're
you know,
just going to play it
yeah,
out. It's
yeah,
everybody.
yeah, you got it. But specifically, they call it a God-shaped hole, and you
Yeah.
seek to fill it in ways that you can't comprehend being filled with until you discover God, and so on on set, it's you're working in the arts, and you're creating, and you're really missing something when you don't bring
Yeah.
God into that equation. And I felt a distinct difference between you know working in Hollywood and with and without God. So
Wow.
it yeah it's funny you ask that, because it's so palatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can really sense it. It is different, and it just makes you want to do more of that. You know.
That's amazing. And it's so good to hear, because I think that for those of us who are outsiders, you always wonder, is this real? Are these people real? Do they care about the message, or is it just a job? And so to hear your testimony, to hear how God tied your story in with the character that you were playing so beautifully, the way that God led within the life of your son, and how he used that to even really intensify your search for God and your relationship with him. So many things that you have testified today, I think, are so exciting for just again reinforcing, I want to see what God is doing through this, because if he's working in these peripheral ways in your life, how is he going to work through this project in the lives of probably millions who come to the theaters to see it?
Oh gosh, yeah, yes. Absolutely. And thank you so much for saying that too, because often I feel like when I listen to people's testimonies, I'm like, wow, that's such an incredible experience. And then I forget that I have those experiences too.
Yeah.
But you're reminding me, you're holding up the mirror and saying, look at this. And but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's quite profound how God
Hmm.
operates, and to share that with all of you, I know it's going to be great. It's going to, people will be moved by this project.
Well, that is awesome. So tell me, kind of as we're wrapping up here, tell me a little bit more specifically about the movie. When does it come out? How
Okay.
can people find out more about it? And I guess everyone's going to ask: is this appropriate for everyone? Is it not
Yeah.
appropriate for kids? So kind of give us a little bit of ideas for parents too about taking their
Yeah,
kids.
I think it's definitely an adult film in terms of content, of topic. I
Yeah,
don't know how many kids will be interested in the story of politics, but I think
yeah,
everyone can relate to perseverance, being called to do something you don't want to do, and then standing up and doing it, even though you're not sure if you have the right footing on how you're approaching it.
yeah,
And this for the pastor goes through this, and then and the words of encouragement from his community or discouragement from his community, and going to God for the answers. I mean, it's a message that everyone can relate to, and I know my son's 11. He's excited to see it, and his friends are
good.
coming to see it. So it comes out September 12th. It'll be in 1,000 theaters across the nation so
Hmm.
far. Um, you can find more on, well, they'll be starting to release all the information on where you can get tickets and whatnot soon enough. I don't have
Yeah,
all of that myself yet. Um, but yeah, please go. I mean, one of the interesting messages of the movie and informations that I learned during this process is that there are 40 million Christians who don't vote. And I
hmm.
mean, that's a big margin, and
That's a huge number.
it's
Yeah,
a huge number. And and again, going back to the idea of our existence is created through the policies that are created in government, who at the moment think that they give us our rights, where we know
yeah,
that our rights are given through God. But the policies can affect the process in which you lead your day-to-day life, and
right.
certainly in regard to our religious freedoms, and how right now Christians are being persecuted through
Mm,
narrative that is
right.
based in absolutely nothing. And I think it's important to show up in the political realm. The worst thing you can say is, I'm not political. I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't want to be. You have to be. That's the way you live your life.
Yeah,
Policy is political, and if we don't show up with our values in that realm, then forget about your values. It can
mm,
exist in your house, but that's about it. So it's important that we take a stand in what we believe in, and we do that through voting. And then there's a
yeah.
whole, does voting, oh gosh, I don't know, but God shows us all, and so where we go, the light is available to us. So if we don't enter those realms, it just might not be there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and us exercising our right, our responsibility to impact policy through our votes
Yeah,
impacts our children more than we know. It is
exactly.
so important because we are right now trying to direct what our children's future society will look like, and there's we can't lose sight of that. And I think that it, because the narrative gets so nasty, and everything gets so frustrating and so tangled, and that's probably on purpose. The enemy wants to make, God is not the author of confusion, but the enemy certainly loves confusion.
Mhm.
So if we just remember that, we have the responsibility, the privilege of at least weighing in, letting our voice be heard on the policies that we know will impact our children. That's a very, very important standard to carry. And it is really, it kind of reframes, I hope, the way that you look at whether you cast your vote or not.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, I am so grateful that you've hung out with me today. I am really, really excited to see God's Not Dead. For all of you who are listening, you can go to godsnotdead.com and learn more. They've got some videos on there for you. They've got some more information, and you're going to want to go ahead, secure your ticket. I know from experience that if enough of us early on start securing our tickets, you're going to see this movie expand into more theaters. It'll have a longer stint in the theaters. So as we are supporting faith-based projects like this, it's really important to get out, get your ticket early, and invite your friends,
Yes,
invite your family.
yes.
I have adult kids. Yeah,
It is a limited release at the moment, so that you're
right.
absolutely right about getting on it right now to expand that would be so incredible.
Yeah, yeah. I have my kids are adults now, so we grab them, their spouses, we kind of pack a pew there at the movies, and we're able to take a lot of people in now. And it's really fun. It's nice to get to do that with a lot of people that I love. But I encourage you to look for either friends, church family, people that you can go with, and just really get behind this project, and let's see if we can't help it expand. We want to cast our vote that makes it clear that we want more faith-based films too, and the way that we do that is we support the ones that come our way. So I encourage you, go to godsnotdead.com, learn more about God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, grab your tickets, and make your plans now to join the cast and crew there. I think you're going to really enjoy the film. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I have loved this conversation.
Oh,
So I'm just glad you were here.
thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome. And to everyone else, I hope that you have enjoyed this as much as I have. I've been fascinated to hear the accounts of how God just weaves life together with art, and the way that He is working in all of the details. It is so good to remind ourselves of His great power, and yet also His great care for individuals. So I hope this has been an encouragement for you. I hope that you are excited to go grab your tickets, make your plans to go see God's Not Dead. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon.